an 80 days, not for the baby, but for the mother. When the mother has a boy, there's a waiting period of 40 days. When the mother has a girl, it's for 80 days. Where is this from? Why is there a waiting period? It's from the Old Testament, and the church took this tradition. However, let me tell you something, that this, again, like, what if an infant is God forbid, needs to be baptized sooner than that or anything like that? They can be baptized. The idea is not about the infant, it's about the mother being the godmother, or the one who is responsible, the ishbin, as we say, the one responsible in the baptism. Because in Coptic baptism, what happens is that when we baptize a child, the witness or the person who is responsible, they're baptized on the faith of, there's a godfather or godmother in the spiritual sense, right? And so it's about the mother being ready for that. This was taken from the Old Testament, from the time of, whenever there was they call it the time of purification, whenever there was a waiting period. So that's where the logic of that comes from. And yes, it is a question today. Okay, so why are we still following this when we're in the New Testament? The short answer to that, because yes, it can be taken as something that doesn't really have an explanation as to why, but the simplest explanation is by understanding how anything in the Coptic Orthodox Church gets changed. Do things get changed throughout the ages when it comes to rites? Yes. Doctrine? No. So this is definitely not a doctrine, but it is a rite, which means it can change. But how do things change in the Coptic Orthodox in the Coptic Orthodox Church? Through the Holy Synod. The Synod makes the decision, for example, of if something is not relevant, the Synod takes a decision and says this is not relevant, right? It has to be agreed upon by the Synod. And until the Synod changes a certain decision, no pope or priest or bishop can just individually make a decision based on their own wisdom or understanding, which is actually it is a double-edged sword, because it means that change takes a longer time. So certain things took 1,000 years to change, and certain things went a little bit faster. However, this is one of the secrets to why the Coptic Orthodox Church has not fallen into heresy, because we always move as a unit according to the Synod. So yes, the negative side sometimes, or what looks like a negative side, is that certain things that have no explanation can take place, because we are in that transition period where, yes, these are things that are being talked about. Now, what ends up happening is people take advantage of things like this and will generalize and will say, oh, the Coptic Church looks at women that they are still in need of purification. What about the Canaanite woman, or like the one that was bleeding? What about all this stuff, right? What about when the woman who was bleeding, when she went up to Christ and she touched him and he did not treat her like she was unclean, all this stuff. Yes, these are relevant things. But when I just look at it from the perspective that the church doesn't want to change it, that's not the truth. The truth is, we do not change anything from our own logic. Even if we have a point, we wait for the Synod to decide, right? It has always been established this way. Even as early as the book of Acts, when there was a disagreement between the Gentile Christians and the Christians who came from a Jewish background, right? James, who was the bishop of Jerusalem at that time, did he take the decision himself to make that bylaw of the 5 rules that would have, instead of having the entire law being followed, right? And being, remember what the issue was over? Should Gentile Christians be circumcised when they enter into the faith or not? And he didn't take this decision himself. He waited for Peter and Paul and the apostles to gather, who were the first patriarchs, in order for them to talk about it and to have a council. And from there, they came out with the those 5 rules, right? Which made it easier for the Gentiles to be able to which definitely took away the requirement of circumcision from the Gentiles, and also made it comfortable for the Jews to still have, what they had from the law. And it kind of put it into a Christian perspective. Now, James could have come up with that himself. Not this James. James could definitely, you can come up with that yourself too, but we're talking about James of Jerusalem right now, right? He was probably a little bit darker than you. But James could have come up with that himself, right? But he didn't take it into his own hands, even though he was the Bishop of Jerusalem. So what I want to say is, yes, there could be things that definitely need discussion. We cannot assume that they're not being discussed and there's not differing opinions. But our opinions are not what changes the dynamic of the church, but rather the synod through the guidance of the Holy Spirit. And this can take years, right? Does that make sense? Okay. Yes, Tracy. They meet yearly. The synod meets yearly and they discuss all kinds of things. But when it comes to something like this, this is one of the things that will take time, for sure, because there will be different opinions and things like that. So when it comes to something that the problem is the church, something has been happening for so many years. For it to change suddenly is something, it takes time. And there's even more examples of things that don't have, for example, a backing in the history of the church that entered the church and have not exited until now, such as men sitting on one side, women sitting on the other side. This was not how this was not traditional in the church. This entered with the Arab conquest of Egypt. But then at some point, in order to protect the Christians of Egypt, the synod decided that, okay, we will make this the rules in the churches so that when if you read into the history of the church, they would actually send police in to see if laws that they put in are being followed, just to persecute us for fun, right? And so in order to protect the Christians, this was something that was put into the law of the church. And it has not exited since, because until today, unfortunately, for example, Egypt is very influenced by a foreign religion that entered it, right? That has become the majority, right? Opposite to common social media knowledge, Egypt is not a Muslim origin country. Egypt was Coptic. The Copts are the indigenous people of Egypt, and the Arab conquest, when they came in, they are the ones that made it into a majority through different means, one of which, and this is history, is persecution, 100%. And we got to say what's got to be said. With all love to our Muslim brothers and sisters, there's no hate towards anybody personally, but these are the facts and this is history, right? And so a lot of the influence that they had stayed. Confession, for example, took different forms throughout the ages because of this kind of influence. They actually, at some point, they banned ordinations, they banned confessions, so many things, right? And so, yes. When the synod, I don't know enough about how the synod makes a decision for me to be able to speak for them, but there is different process for different things. I'm not an expert in that, but what we know for sure, and what we know that how the church was established and how it will continue to go, is any decision or anything that changes through a decision from the synod. Within the synod, there is different committees and things like committee for rights, committee for different issues, and through that they meet and discuss, and and from there is where we get guidance. But what is the process exactly? That's something that I'm not an expert. I can't. Maybe Abuna Athanasius would know. Yes. Again, it is justified in the Old Testament, but nothing in the New Testament about it. But it has Old Testament logic. That is the justification of it, right? Because in the Old Testament, from the Jewish perspective, that this is the time that the woman needs for purification, and as per Jewish law, right? Which again, this is not as Christians what we stand for, but there is like when they, and again, this will sound controversial, but the woman, whenever in Jewish law, there are times where the woman is impure, and the man as well. Like if you were to read Leviticus, you would see that at any time of anything being discharged or anything like that, the person is considered unclean. Of course, this is a Synod decision that came out in 2011, actually, that, like, is it not as a decision, but as a statement. There's an official statement from the Synod that said at no point is a man or woman unclean. This does not, after the salvation given by Christ, it is not fitting that we say, and we can actually, this is public knowledge, we can pull it up and I can send it on the group for everybody to see. It's translated in English as well. They corrected this, that we do not believe that at any point anyone is unclean, but anything that prevents from communion, like when we say, for example, that like at certain points of the month, or if somebody is having some kind of bleeding, man or woman, or there's any kind of secretions, that there are times where we are not ready for communion, or even, for communion, then this is not because of being unclean, but the body is considered not to be fasting at that time, which are two completely different things, if that makes sense. But the logic behind that originated from the Old Testament, not the statement of the Synod, but the logic behind the waiting period for the mother originated from the Old Testament. And you can look back in the Bible why it originated from the Old Testament, because the majority of Christians that are from Jerusalem came from a Jewish background. So they were baptized after, like they had the Old Testament and they were baptized into Christianity. And this was something that was kept, right? But again, as we see, yes, it took a while, but the official stance of the Coptic Orthodox Church, there is no time where we are unclean. Now, okay, if this is the case, then why is it that we still have the 40 days and the 80 days? That I do not know. I do not know. It is something that is still in discussions, and it is something that what I can say is there's a lot of discussions around it, right? But it's not in our hands to take the decision ourselves based on what we see in something like that. But we have faith that as certain things continue to change or not change, that there's a divine wisdom to it, right? It's also an important clarification that at no point does this mean that the boy or girl that are to be baptized are to be prevented from baptism. There are many people that were baptized before 40 days, even like a week old, or in the hospital or things like that. There has been things like this. Absolutely. Just like if a baby is about to, God forbid, like they're about to lose him or somebody's sick. Actually, I don't know if I should say this live, but my uncle and a few of my relatives, they had to be baptized way before 40 days. And thank God, my uncle is now a priest and stuff. Yeah, but this is not baptism. This is not the except. No. So it's not an exception. It's nothing prevents baptism. But for example, like I'll use my uncle as an example. Right, my uncle, when he got baptized a week old in the hospital, the witness or the godparent for him was his brother, my oldest uncle. Right, he was the witness, I believe, if I remember correctly. So it couldn't be Teta, it couldn't be my grandma, right? Because it was literally a week after the birth. And even at that time, by the way, like the mother is still recovering. Like I don't know if you know or not, but usually the average time for a woman to recover from giving birth is about 40 days. And sometimes it takes longer than that. So, okay. Yes. Sorry, I can barely hear you. Nice to meet you. Welcome. What's your background? Okay. Okay, yeah. So the Coptic Orthodox Church, right? For us, the Bible is both Old and New Testament, not just New Testament. We don't trash the Old Testament. That being said, what is the Old Testament to us? The Old Testament, right, shows what was fulfilled in the New Testament, right? Jesus said, I didn't come to destroy, but to fulfill. There are certain things that are similar in the sense, if you want to say from Old Testament, when it comes to certain things that don't affect, I want to say, the doctrine itself. For example, Jesus is the Messiah, right? What separates us from the Jews, from Judaism, is they are stuck in the Old Testament believing that the Messiah hasn't come. Jesus to them was a rebel, or whatever they say, right? And so yes, and then certain things definitely resemble what was in the Old Testament that could still be relevant, that fulfills and does not contradict what Christ was teaching, right? Because Christ himself kept a lot of what was in the Old Testament, right? But anything that, for example, whenever we choose the oblation bread, the bread that will be, so in the church we pick one of the loaves that was baked that will be prayed on, and then it becomes the body and the wine becomes the blood. There is a process where we pick which loaf, the urbana, we call it the urbana. We pick the one that is without blemish, the one that is the best out of the 7 or 5 or 3, the odd number. Where do we get this from? From the Old Testament. Now, does this mean that we are sacrificing an animal or something like this? No. But why? Because when we pick a lamb without blemish, this represents Christ himself. Just like in the Old Testament, when the best of what the person had would be is what is sacrificed, it represented the Messiah himself. Yes. No, you didn't know. I was just finished. God what? The architecture has symbolism, but in the history of the Coptic Orthodox Church, the architecture is not really what mattered, because the first Coptic churches were houses. The first church in the Coptic Orthodox Church, Coptic church means Egyptian church, when Mark came to Egypt, was the house of the cobbler, I think cobbler, is that the, yeah, who fixed his shoes. His name was Anianos. And it was at his house where the first church was established. And then after, in the time of persecution, we used to pray underground because it was illegal to have churches. Later on, when Christianity became legal, we were able to build churches. And then the architecture of the church has symbolism in the Coptic Orthodox Church. And we can talk about this after for the sake of time, but the symbolism, we either build it in the shape of a cross, a shape of a circle, or a shape of an ark. 3 of them representing salvation. And like God's salvation and God's nature, right? Circle, obviously God has no beginning or end. The cross, and then the ark, Noah's ark, right? It doesn't mean that we're all animals in Noah's ark, but we're just talking about how Noah's ark, saved. Yeah. Yes. Good questions. All right. For the sake of time, let's get into the Bible study. We're going to finish Genesis today. And then definitely after, if there's more questions, we can definitely address it. I'm not shutting the door for questions. We just need, for the sake of time, to get into the Bible study, and we can address whatever questions you guys would like to ask. Okay. All right. So last time we finished up to chapter 45. Or we finished chapter 45. Today we're going to take from 46 to 50, continuing on the events that were happening in Egypt. Okay. So we finished, actually, did we take 45? Did Joseph reveal himself to his brothers yet? No. So we're on 45, actually. Not the highway, but the chapter in the Bible. That joke. Okay. Name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, one God, amen. Now Joseph could not restrain himself before all those who stood by him and cried out, "Make everyone go out from me." So no one stood with him while Joseph made himself known to his brothers. Then he wept aloud, and the Egyptians in the house of Pharaoh heard it. Joseph then said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Does my father still live?" But his brothers could not answer him, for they were stunned in his presence. But Joseph said to his brothers, "Come near to me." So they came near. And then he said, "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. Now therefore go and do not be grieved or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to save life. For this is the second year of famine in the land, and 5 years still remain, which there will be neither plowing nor harvesting. For God sent me before you to preserve you as a remnant on the earth and to sustain you as a great remnant. So now it was not you who sent me here, but God. And he made me a father to Pharaoh and Lord of all his house and a ruler throughout the land of Egypt. Hurry then and go up to my father and say to him, thus says your son Joseph, God made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me. Do not tarry. You shall dwell in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near to me. You and your children, your children's children, your sheep and oxen, and all you have there I will provide for you, lest you and your household and all you have come to poverty. For 5 years of famine still remain. And behold, your eyes and the eyes of my brother Benjamin see it is my mouth that speaks to you. Therefore you shall tell my father of all the glory in Egypt and all you have seen. So as we see here, he reveals himself, and right away we see another key to Joseph's success and why God is with him all the time. Joseph understood that all the negative and all the tribulation that he went through and all the unfairness and discrimination and being sold to slavery and then being falsely accused and thrown into prison, he realized that God had something amazing in store, not just for him or his family, but for everyone, right? We said, God allowed for this for me to save life. What if I told you that each one of us every single day are called to save life? Yes, we may not be storing up grain because of a 7-year famine. But every day, at least, when I repent, guess what? I'm doing my part in salvation, which is what? When I repent, I am telling the Lord that I want you in my life. And I am, in a way, saving my life from the life of sin. Of course, it would not be possible without His grace and without Him forgiving us and strengthening us and helping us to see and to discern. But the point is, every single day as Christians, we are called to have a part in saving life. When He says you are the light of the world, you are the salt of the earth, it's not just about us, saying, yes, I believe and I come to church and I pray and that's it. There is a responsibility I have that I represent Christ as Joseph represented life in Egypt, right? You'll see actually a cool note in the icon, any icon that is written of Joseph. Whenever we talk about icons, we don't say drawn or painted because an icon is a language. Icons of Joseph, when they are written, you will notice that he's not just in pharaonic clothing, but the key of life, the key of life of Egypt, is always portrayed on him. Not because it looks pharaonic and cool, but because he played a part that represented Christ, in the sense that what Joseph, when he saved Egypt from the famine, is just like how Christ, after being falsely accused and crucified and rising from the dead, he saved humanity from certain death. Does that make sense? That's why we say Joseph is a type of Christ. And so Joseph understood this part of him having a bigger role or there was more to the fact than just him being discriminated and living in this kind of humiliation. So he calls up Jacob, right? He commands his brothers to tell Jacob to come. Next chapter, chapter 46, let's read the important parts in it. Now Israel took his journey with all he had and came to the well of oath, and he offered a sacrifice to God of his father Isaac, and offered a sacrifice to the God of his father Isaac. Then God spoke to Israel in a vision of the night and said, Jacob, Jacob. So he said, Here I am. So God said to him, I am the God of your fathers. Do not fear to go down to Egypt. I will make of you a great nation there. I will go down with you to Egypt, and I will also surely bring you up again, and Joseph will put his hand on your eyes. Then Jacob arose from the well of oath, and the sons of Israel carried their father Jacob, their baggage, and their wives in the carts Pharaoh had sent to carry him. So they took their livestock and their goods, which they had acquired in the land of Canaan, and went to Egypt. Jacob and all his seed with him, his sons and his sons' sons, his daughters and his sons' daughters, and all his seed he brought with him to Egypt. Now, these were the names of the children of Israel, Jacob and his sons, who went to Egypt. Reuben was Jacob's firstborn. The sons of Reuben were Enoch. We're going to skip the genealogy here. You can read this on your own. I'm not saying it's less important, but for the sake of time, we're not going to read the genealogy for now. Now he sent, verse 28, now he sent Judah before him to Joseph, that he might meet him in Goshen in the land of Ramesses. So Joseph made ready his chariot and went up to Goshen to meet his father Israel, and he presented himself to him and fell on his neck and wept a good while. This is a beautiful scene that we've been waiting for a few chapters, right? Ever since Jacob's heart got broken because he lost Joseph and he was convinced that he died. Here is the big reunion. Then Israel said to Joseph, now let me die in peace, since I have seen your face, because you are still alive. Joseph then said to his brothers, I will go up and tell Pharaoh and say unto him, my brothers and those of my father's house who were in the land of Canaan have come to me. But the men are shepherds, for they are pastoral men, and they have brought their flocks, their herds, and all they have. So it shall be when Pharaoh calls you and says, what is your occupation? Then you shall say, your servants are pastoral men from our youth even till now, both we and also our fathers, that you may dwell in the land of Goshen in Arabia, for every shepherd is an abomination to the Egyptians. Now Joseph went and told Pharaoh and said, my father and my brothers, their flocks and their herds and all they possess have come from the land of Canaan. Indeed, they are in the land of Goshen. So he took 5 men from among his brothers and presented them to Pharaoh. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph's brothers, what is your occupation? They said to Pharaoh, your servants are shepherds, both we and our fathers. They also said to Pharaoh, we have come to dwell in the land because your servants have no pasture for their cattle, for the famine is severe in the land of Canaan. Now therefore let your servants dwell in the land of Goshen. Then Pharaoh spoke to Joseph, saying, let them dwell in the land of Goshen. If you know of capable men among them, make them overseers of my cattle. Thus Jacob and his sons came to Egypt, and Pharaoh, king of Egypt, heard about it. So Pharaoh spoke to Joseph, saying, your father and your brothers have come to you. The land of Egypt is before you. Have your father and your brothers dwell in the best of the land. And Joseph brought in his father Jacob and set him before Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Jacob, how old are you? Jacob said to Pharaoh, the days of the years of my sojourn are 130 years. Few and evil have they been, but they have not attained to the days and the years of my father's sojourn in life. You know, in the litany of the departed, when we say in the litany of the travelers, when we say our sojourn, we use this term sojourn, that we are sojourners in this life. Keep us in your faith and grant us your peace unto the end. This is where we get this exact expression, and that's the spirit. When Jacob talks about his life and he talks about his father's life, he calls it a sojourn. It's not a sojourn because like they travel from place to place and that's it. But also it's a sojourn in the sense that our life is a journey, right? And we have to understand that the end of that journey is eternal unity with Christ, right? That is the point here. So Jacob So Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from before him. Thus Joseph settled his father and brothers and gave them a possession in the land of Egypt, in the best of the land, in the land of Ramesses, as Pharaoh commanded. Then Joseph provided his father and his brothers and all his father's household with bread according to the number of individual persons. Now there was no food in all the land, for the famine was very severe. Both the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan were devastated by the famine. So Joseph gathered up all the money found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan for the grain they bought, and all he doled out to them. And Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. Thus, when the money ran out in the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, "Give us bread, for why should we die in your presence? For our money has run out." Then Joseph said, "Bring your cattle, and I will give you bread for them, if your money has run out." So they brought their cattle to Joseph, and he gave them bread in exchange for their horses, sheep, oxen, and donkeys. Thus he fed with the bread that year in exchange for all their cattle. When that year ended, they came to him next year and said to him, "We will not hide from the Lord that our money has run out. From my Lord, that the money has run out, and my Lord also has our possessions and cattle. There is nothing left in the sight of my Lord but our bodies and our lands. Why should we die, therefore, before your eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for bread, and we and our land will be servants of Pharaoh. Give us seed that we may live and not die, that the land may not be desolate." So Joseph bought all the land of the Egyptians for Pharaoh, for every man of the Egyptians sold his land to Pharaoh, because the famine was severe upon them. Thus the land became Pharaoh's. Now for the people, he moved them into the cities from one end of the border of Egypt to the other. Only the land of the priests he did not buy, for the priests had rations allotted to them by Pharaoh, and they ate the rations Pharaoh gave them. Therefore they did not sell their land. So then Joseph said to all the Egyptians, "Indeed, I have brought you and your land this day for Pharaoh. Look, there is seed for you, and you shall sow the land. Then it shall come to pass in the harvest that you shall give 1/5 to Pharaoh. 4/5 should be your own. So as seed for the field and for your food, for those of your households." So they said, "You have saved our lives. Let us find grace in the sight of my Lord, and we will be Pharaoh's servants." Then Joseph made it a law over the land of Egypt to this day, that Pharaoh should have 1/5, except for the land of the priests only, which did not become Pharaoh's. So in a way, he put taxes, right? So Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt, in the land of Goshen, and they acquired possessions there and increased and multiplied exceedingly. Now Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. So the length of Jacob's life was 147 years. Thus, when the time drew near for Jacob to die, he called his son Joseph and said to him, if I have found grace in your sight, put your hand under my thigh and deal with me in mercy and truth. Do not bury me in Egypt, but let me lie with my fathers. You shall carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burial place. So he said, I will do so. I will do as you say. Then he said, swear to me, and he swore to him. So Israel bowed himself on the top of his staff. The next chapter here, I want you to pay attention to something very, very important. Now it came to pass after these things that Joseph was told, indeed your father is sick, and he took with him his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, and went to Jacob. Then Jacob was told, look, your son Joseph is coming to you. And Israel strengthened himself and sat up on the bed. Then Jacob said to Joseph, my God appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me, and said to me, behold, I will increase and multiply you, and I will make you a gathering of nations, and give this land to your seed after you, and everlasting possession. Now therefore your two sons Ephraim and Manasseh, who were born to you in the land of Egypt before I came to Egypt, are mine. As Reuben and Simeon, they shall be mine. Your offspring whom you beget after them shall take possession of their inheritances within the tribes of their brothers. But as for me, when I came to Mesopotamia of Syria, Rachel died beside me in the land of Canaan on the way, when they were but a little distance to go to Ephrathah, and I buried her there on the way to Ephrathah, that is Bethlehem. Then Israel saw Joseph's sons and said, who are these with you? So Joseph said to his father, they are my sons. God gave me here. Jacob then said, Bring them to me that I may bless them. Now the eyes of Israel were dim by reason of old age, and he could not see. So Joseph brought them near, and he kissed and embraced them. Then Israel said to Joseph, I had not thought to see your face, but in fact God has also shown me your seed. So Joseph brought them from beside his knees, and they bowed down their face to the ground. Then Joseph took them both, Ephraim with his right hand towards Israel's left hand, and Manasseh with his left hand toward Israel's right hand, and brought them near. Thus Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on Ephraim's head, who was the younger, and his left on Manasseh's head, guiding his hands knowingly. For Manasseh was firstborn. Then he blessed them and said, God, before whom my fathers Abraham, Isaac were well pleasing, the God who has fed me all my life long to this day, the angel who redeemed me from all evil, bless these lads, let my name be named upon them, and the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a great multitude in the midst of the earth. Now Joseph saw his father put his right hand on the head of Ephraim. It displeased him, so he took hold of his father's hand and removed it from Ephraim's head and head to Manasseh's head. So Joseph said to his father, not so, my father, for this one is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head. But his father refused and said, I know, my son, I know. He also shall become a people, and he shall be exalted, but truly his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his seed shall become a multitude of nations. So he blessed them that day, saying, by you Israel will be blessed, saying, may God make you as Ephraim and Manasseh. Thus he set Ephraim before Manasseh. Then Israel said to Joseph, behold, I am about to die, but God will be with you and bring you back to the land of your fathers. Moreover, I have given you one portion above your brothers. I am giving you Shechem, which I took from the hand of the Amorites with my sword and bow. Okay, so this is the important part of this chapter. When Joseph took his sons, who was the oldest? Manasseh, and the younger? Ephraim. So he brought the oldest towards his father's right hand, and the youngest towards his left hand, right? The right hand was for the older, right? To take the blessing. But what did Jacob do? He put his right hand on the younger one and the left hand on the older one. So it looked like what? Who got the blessing? The younger son, right? Before we get into where do we see this in the liturgy, let's first talk about what is the significance of what Jacob did here. And is there any prophetic spirit to it or something that is representing the cross in any way? What do you guys think? First of all, I just want to say, for those who say, where does the cross exist as a symbol in the Bible? It exists from the Old Testament. Here it is, right? That's one instance. But it's important also to understand how this is symbolic of the cross, is that the cross that gave salvation, right? Gave salvation to those, to who? Who did the cross give salvation to? Everybody, right? To everybody who calls on his name and believes in him. If we look at the context of God's chosen people, right? The Israelites, we can look at them as the firstborn. They rejected Christ, and then who became God's chosen people? The lesser, right? The Gentiles. Everybody, the whole world, right? And so the cross was the reason for salvation for everyone. The Gentiles, right, who are no longer now called Gentiles. Everybody that believes in Christ is called a Christian. And nobody being better than anybody else. Does that make sense? And so this symbol that he did, that the younger will have the more blessing, represented this exact aspect, that the cross took away the significance of the firstborn, right? this sense of entitlement, God's chosen people. They rejected him. Everybody is God's chosen people, right? For God so loved the what? Whole world, right? That he gave his only begotten Son, that anyone that believes in him should not perish but have eternal life, everlasting life, through the cross. Make sense? All right. Now, where do we see this in the liturgy? Whenever we would choose the Urbana, the one we were just mentioning a few minutes ago, you'll notice that the priest representative of this, and then afterwards, when he blesses the rest of the Urbanas, after he has picked the one that becomes a lamb, he says, sacrifice of Abraham, sacrifice of Isaac, sacrifice of Jacob, sacrifice of Melchizedek. Right? And so, there you go. Right? Another part of the Old Testament that we still have significance in our rites. We're saying, I'm sorry, say that again. Not only, no, I'm telling you like an important symbolism in it. But yes, he blessed both of them. But the point that he emphasized that the younger is more blessed than the older. The sense of that God's choice, or like what God chooses is more significant than what we choose, right? Who did this also happen with? Jacob himself, right? This was the difference, yeah. Well, Esau was just hungry. Okay. So the next two chapters talk about Jacob's final words to his sons. And then it talks about, and then after that, it is Jacob's death in chapter 50, and we will read that. We will go quickly through Jacob's final words as well, because it has some really interesting things and maybe information that you guys didn't know before. Gather together and hear, you sons of Jacob, and listen to Israel your father. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, and the beginning of my children. You are hard to bear. You are hardened in your self-will, unstable as water in your insolence. You went up to your father's bed, then you defiled it. Simeon and Levi are brothers. They accompanied their injustice from their free choice. Let not my soul enter their council. Let not my honor be united to their assembly. For in their anger they slew a man, and in their self-will they hamstrung an ox. Cursed be their anger, for it was self-willed, and their wrath, for it was hardened. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. Judah, you are he whom your brothers shall praise. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons will bow down before you. Judah is a lion's cub. From being a shoot, my son, you have grown up. He bows down and slept as a lion and a cub, and who shall rouse him? Okay. Let's stop at Judah here for a second. You are he whom your brothers shall praise. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's cub. Why? What's significant about the tribe of Judah? Yes. And then look at this in verse 10. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from his loins, until Shiloh comes, and to him shall be the expectation of the nations. Talking about Jesus, right? Binding his colt to a vine, and his donkey's colt to its branch. Colt and his donkey's colt? Anything significant about that? Okay. And his clothes in the blood of grapes. His eyes are glanted from the wine, and his teeth are whiter than milk. Do we have any dentists here? Yes. You love that part, don't you? Yes. I'm sure that that's a great merchandising right there, right? The Judah whitening. um, the lion smile. There you go. There you go. Yes. But we see here many Eucharistic and salvific prophecies, right, about Judah. And everything from the entrance into Jerusalem, binding his colt to a vine and his donkey's colt to its branch. He will wash his garments in wine, and his clothes in the blood of grapes, which shows significance. Like when we talk about why is wine, what was that Christ? Why did Christ use wine specifically for the sacrament of communion? Why is it that the wine becomes the blood? And is there anything in the Old Testament that talks about this? As early as Genesis, we see the parallels, the Eucharistic parallels that mentions, and his clothes in the blood of grapes. What is significant about the grapes and the blood, right? Of course, we know that wine comes from the grapes. Okay. Zabulon shall dwell by the sea coast. He shall be near a haven for ships, and his border shall be adjoined Sidon. Issachar desired what was good, resting between the inheritance, and seeing his resting place was good, and the land was fertile. He set his shoulder to hard work, and became a farmer. Dan shall judge his own people as one of the tribe of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent by the way, a viper, lying in ambush by the path, that bites the horse's heel, that its rider may fall backwards, waiting for the Lord's salvation. And the church fathers, weird that he says that about Dan, right? The church fathers tell us, or in the tradition, it says that the Antichrist is going to be from the seed of Dan. That's why it mentions this about him. As for Gad, a raider gang shall raid him, but he shall raid them in close pursuit. As for Asher, his food shall be abundant, and he will furnish dainties for rulers. Naphtali is a spreading stem, bestowing beauty by its produce. Joseph is a grown-up son that was envied. O my youngest son, return to me. They devised evil plans against him and reviled him, and the archers were taking aim at him. But their bows were broken by force, and the sinews of the arms of their hands were enfeebled on account of the land of the mighty one of Jacob. Thence he who strengthens Israel is from God of your father, and my God has helped you and blessed you with a blessing from heaven above, and with the blessing of the earth, containing everything. By reason of the blessing of breast and the womb, he made the blessing of your father and mother stronger than the blessing of stable mountains and everlasting hills. They shall be on the head of Joseph, and on the crown of the brothers' he led. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning he will still be eating, and in the evening he will provide food. All these are the 12 sons of Israel, and this is what their father spoke to them and blessed them, and he blessed each one according to his own blessing. Then charged them and said to them, I am to be added to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave in the field of Ephron the Hittite, opposite to Mamre in the land of Canaan, which Abraham bought from Ephron the Hittite as a possession for a burial place. There they buried Abraham and Sarah his wife. Then they buried Isaac and Rebekah his wife, and there I buried Leah. The field and the cave that were purchased from the sons of Heth. Thus, when Jacob finished commanding his sons, he drew his feet up into the bed and breathed his last, and was added to his people. The next chapter, the last chapter of Genesis, we see actually Joseph's death. He dies in Egypt, and we see also before that Joseph comforting his brothers, and the burial of Jacob. The significance, of course, we mentioned it quickly, of all the things that Jacob talked about here, one thing that I wanted to emphasize was about Judah, about the tribe of Judah and the Eucharistic symbols. There's also a very important verse that I want us to leave here with. Let me pull it up here real quick. What is the most important thing that we can actually learn from Joseph's life that can sum it all up, in your opinion? When we sum up like all of Joseph's life, we know he was successful and all this stuff, but if we had to pick like one verse that we can say like, okay, this describes exactly what happened to Joseph. What is your opinion? In my opinion, it is Genesis chapter 50, verse 20. As Joseph is comforting his brothers, he says something that is so deep. He says, "But as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring it about as it is this day, to save many people alive." Right? What was meant as evil, what was meant as a plot against him, what was meant to destroy him, was actually, God took that and turned it into salvation for many. So one thing that we leave Genesis with and leave the story of Joseph with, all the events that we read about, from Adam until Joseph in Genesis, right? Everything that was meant to destroy was used for salvation. The fall of mankind, right? God did not stand defeated, but this initiated what? Initiated his plan for salvation and the incarnation. When the flood happened, the evil of the people, and when God flooded the world, right? It strengthened the faith of Noah and his sons through the ark, and it made God's people that remained repentant even stronger. And then when we shift gears and we talk about Abraham leaving his family, leaving everything that he knew, right, being told to sacrifice his son, all the incidents that we ran into, what looks on the outside as unexplainable, evil, inconvenient, was used to make him a great nation. Isaac, the same thing, right? The story of Isaac, everything from how he was, matched with Rebekah, and then the story of his sons, and all the different incidents that happened. And then, of course, with Jacob. Jacob was we spent a lot of time with Jacob and with Esau, and with all his scams and all the stuff that happened, right? But what do we see in the end? That Jacob, who grew up as a mama's boy and a liar and all these things, but he became Israel. And you see, from the beginning of his life to now, look at the wisdom that he's saying and the prophecies that he's talking about and his role. And with Jacob specifically, that when he spent so many years with tears in his eyes over his son that he thought was dead. And he was at the end of his life. He was an old man. That's it. There's nothing else to live for. But he held on. And God didn't just allow him, as we read a few chapters ago, God didn't just allow him to be reunited with his son, but he allowed him to see Joseph's seed as well. Right? And then from Joseph himself, everything from, this spoiled child, he began as a spoiled child, but every tribulation that he went through, from being hated by his brothers, to being cast into a pit, to being sold into slavery, falsely accused, becoming imprisoned for many years and forgotten. And then after that, he starts to rise to power, right? None of this was his own effort. But what was allowed for evil became good. And the success was beyond what anybody expected. If I could go back to one of these characters that we read about, one of these very important characters, and ask them, what were you thinking the solution of your problems would be? Do you think any of them would actually respond and say, yeah, I expected to be the ruler of Egypt? No, I don't think so. What is the point of what I'm trying to say? Let God work in your life and don't jump to conclusions. The most important points in our life can sometimes be the tribulation that we're going through, the confusion we're going through, the conflict that we're going through. Because when we wait it out with faith and trusting God and praying to Him, you'll find that the answer that comes is not just an answer, but it's a transformed life for you and for all those that come after you. Glory be to God forever, amen. Important homework, 2 things, okay? This Friday, we're going to have 2 liturgies. Of course, if you can attend Wednesday, that's good. Friday, I know we're going to have only one liturgy at 9 o'clock, but we're going to have the unction of the sick at 9, and then after that, the liturgy will begin at 10. Then we have a second liturgy at 3 p.m. Why? Because not everybody is off of school, or everybody is off of school, but not everybody's off of work, and so Friday, you have the opportunity to attend either the early liturgy at 9 o'clock, or you will come from 9, and then the liturgy after that is at 10, or you can attend the late liturgy at 3 p.m. Take the blessing of the last Friday of the fast. Okay? Your other homework, aside from attending everything that has to deal with Passion Week next week, God willing, is to think among yourselves what you want to read next. We're done with Genesis. And so think about it. Send me suggestions. We'll narrow it down. We'll vote on it. And we'll start, God willing, after resurrection. So there's no Bible chat next week because there's Bascha. So hopefully we can all be there at Bascha. Okay? Whether you're Coptic or you're not, you're invited. Everybody can come and pray the Bascha. It's the most beautiful prayers that we have all year in the Coptic calendar. So don't miss out if you're able to come, of course. Okay? All right. Make us worthy to pray thankfully, saying, Our Father, art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, forgive us our trespasses, forgive those trespasses, consisting us not temptation, the rest of the evil one. Christ Jesus our Lord, thine the kingdom, power, and the glory forever. Amen. The love of God the Father, grace of the only begotten Son,